Hi, I'm Bess Rocklitzer, president of the David Burbank Foundation. Thank you for joining us. Today we welcome KRISTIN Jones as our presenter. KRISTIN is a dear friend, and in fact, she is responsible for creating this beautiful piece I sit in front of as I speak. More importantly, though, KRISTIN has known David Burbank since 1985, and she was one of the original artists David offered so much support and encouragement to at that time. There were many others, but she was one of the first. KRISTIN is based in New York City, and she spent the majority of her career creating large-scale site-specific works for public areas. I am thrilled that she has taken the time to be with us today for Color, Light, Motion, hosted and created by Victoria Vesna. Please enjoy.
I'm actually delighted to have you as our guest, and in particular because of your commitment to urban renewal and environmental awareness, which is so important right now. And all these large scale projects that are very collaborative. So as we were discussing your feature, what I was very impressed by is how important it was for you to make sure that all your collaborators were mentioned and credited, which is not true for a lot of artists. All of us work collaboratively, whether we paint or draw or do large-scale projects. So you were part of a dream team that's created the master plan for Hudson River Park, which also is super exciting for me recently, spending a lot of time in Hudson River area. And you also spend a lot of time in Rome. So I hope we'll be hearing about this too, because it's a huge project that deals with the River Tiber. And that also was something that we talked about when we first met. And I was so impressed with some of those projections and installations. So we're excited to have you give us some background, to pepper it with some interesting stories that you had with David. There's always interesting stories around David Burbank. And also very exciting for our audiences today is that your longtime collaborator, Andrew Ginzel, is going to join us at the end, as well as Ted Victoria, who's another artist that was supported for many years by David Burbank. Sally Weber, who was recently profiled, joined us too, which is amazing. And then Amir and Emily, who will be featured next month, will also be joining us for a discussion. So that's super exciting that after your talk, we can all come together and also get some audience responses too. So without further ado, KRISTIN, it's all yours, and we're excited to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Victoria, and Bess, for creating this situation. I've watched every single talk. I've been terrified because David and Susan meant so much to me. I can't possibly thank them, but I worked very hard, and I've worked very hard ever since David invested, sort of primed the pump. And it's just been an extraordinary adventure. And for me, it's always collaborative. You know, I really, really believe in synergy. I really believe in the alchemy of things. I'm completely terrified of just a white piece of paper. You know, I really do like to cook things up. So I'm going to show you way too much work, so you'll have to bear with me, because I really owe a great deal to the very beginnings. I just wish David and Susan were here with us today. It was wonderful to be part of their love that they shared with the world, to have witnessed the building of their brief lives together with such joy. Susan was really a mother, a nurturer, and David was energy and joy himself. It's such an honor. David was incredibly passionate and generous. He had a real understanding of the challenge that an artist takes to choose to do their work, to be an idealist. And his support really was enormously encouraging. He was a real friend, a true friend, even though we were completely different generations. He was a kinetic personality himself. He embodied his belief in art, and believed it should be accessible to the public and concurrent with scientific research. So, you know, Susan also was really essential. She and her brother Chris have kept who is the technical curator who kept all the works going, but together they were really a nurturing force. And Susan was a really spiritual person. Anyway, she was the nurturer of all living beings, of four-legged creatures and two-legged creatures, of which David was one. It was really beautiful to watch that. So I'm going to jump in and show some work. I really have responded to the collection. Let's see if I can move forward. I'm sorry. There we go. So of course, Duchamp is major figure in this world, and has been such a profound influence on so many of us. And so I love this piece, Rhoda Relief, in the collection. Also, Jean Tinguely, whose work I knew from Switzerland, was just so much fun and so absurd and so fantastic also that he was Swiss, a country where I lived for a number of years. Also, I love the work of the Signas, which was so dramatic and so fragile and yet so spectacular. And Clyde Linds's work, his celestial work, just so quiet and so technically exquisite. I really love that work. Also, I love Ted Victoria's work, and I'm thrilled that he's here with us today. I just recently visited his studio to encourage him to join us today. And you know, he allows you to see behind the scenes. I mean, you really get to go into this cabinet of wonder, and it's not film. All the objects are really there. He's working with mirrors and lenses. It's really beautiful. So I'm going to jump into some early of my own projects, where I built this thread pyramid in this exquisite daylit gallery, 6,000 elastic threads raining down from the light. And you'll see in the pieces that I'm working on today for the Pantheon that this work is, you know, I feel also that we're in our lives, we make the same work again and again. And so you'll see the resonance across the work. You know, my life as an artist begins by being hypnotized by a potter's wheel at this folk art museum. And later I signed up for this ceramics class where you just take your thumb and you stick it in a ball of clay. And that was the beginning of when I was 13, my first art class. Fast forward, I'm at the School of Art and Architecture at Yale, and I thought I would have this enormous studio. And lo and behold, I was given this deep, sort of dark space, and I built this lens into it. It's a plaster piece outside on the wall. You look into this world, it's about 30 feet deep, and there's a rain of sand. There's a chimney of smoke rising, and you look out across this water where boats are floating literally on water. None of this is video, it's all built. And there's a small projection in the very back that you see sort of through these layers into. It's a work that was seen by Richard Bellamy, who, when he left, he sort of hadn't much to say, but he gasped and he said, "Keep in touch." And I did. This is my thesis work at the Art and Architecture building, the Rudolph building at Yale, which is this 2-story high space where there's a curtain of falling water and this balance beam. And many people worked on this piece, including Andrew Ginsel, who I had only just met. We met at the Hirschhorn. And when I met Andrew, I understood that I had met a magician. And we built just miraculous work for together almost 20 years. This is a piece built at the clock tower called Worldview, where there's a tank of water and there's this sandscape and there's this. So these are works that David wouldn't have seen because we hadn't met him yet. But this was a piece also in the studio that's 30 feet deep that you look out over this Chinese wok that we've painted, turned upside down and put lights in. It's all very much real things, like from the kitchen sink, like this is just gas burning and this is water spraying in focused light. So they're very, very basic elements. And this is the first official work we ever did together, called Spheric Storm. It was for Art Galaxy. Richard Bellamy and Barbara Flynn were running this gallery. It was Barbara's gallery, but Dick was very much involved. And we had just come back from Rome. I had won a Fulbright from Yale and went to Rome for a year, where I was able to see these incredible creche scenes, the scenes that show the miracle of the birth of Christ. And so why not come back to New York and make this sort of infinite landscape that's a view that we don't see except for into the sky here in the city. So we built this scene of that built from complete darkness into this raging, fantastic scene where there's thunder and lightning, a whirlpool that is whirling with water. The foreground is this volcanic sand that's actually erupting. And Andrew was this total mad magician who had been working for years, both with Red Grooms and Alice Aycock, to build their fantastic mechanical sculptures. So this piece builds up into this raging storm and then dissolves. Taking these photographs is also a small miracle. When I was at Yale, I met the university photographer, Charles Erickson, and all these photographs were taken by Charlie. We're working with film and we're working with masking and layers and focusing into the depth. So this is not the digital age, this is actual film. And so I'm enormously indebted to so many people, including Charlie. All of these photographs were Charlie. So this is this little theater on the street, on Mott Street at Art Galaxy. And you kind of had to risk your life to look into this sloped windshield there. This is a work that we built for a show at the Whitney at Philip Morris, where we're actually striping the window of the street and you can see yellow taxi cabs streaming by because the background, it's a layered work built into the wall. And there's a tank of water that goes up and down that animates these elements, but behind is the city and you're directly across from Grand Central Station. So it's very alive. There's just these like tiny little pinstripes of real world. And here a piece at the Clock Tower Gallery. When I came back from Rome, I was lucky enough to win a studio on the top floor of the clock tower, where this piece was built for one of the studio artists show. Tom Finkelpearl was the curator at the time of the clock tower. And this was the entire end wall of the gallery where we built this like steaming, fantastic Annunciation scene with this solenoid. And then we built a piece that you couldn't actually make, but photograph. And this is photographed in our studio. We're working with, alcohol and hairspray and some of the parts of earlier works, a meteorological balloon, steam and rays of light. And it's all there, but of course nobody could see it because it was very short. This is backstage now, where we're just animating this world. We were invited to do an installation at this brand new white enormous gallery, at the Virginia Center of Fine Arts, and built this work called Ephemeris, where there's this meteorological balloon in the foreground, which is about 12 feet in diameter, that we coated with this very, 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 very black ink. And there's a floor of vermiculite. Anyway, it's just an installation that you would see through a scrim. So you kind of had to rub your eyes because you couldn't quite focus. This is a project we did called Charybdis at the MIT List Center for Visual Arts, where there's this beam of light, just like inside the Pantheon, that travels around this circular room and warps as it and turns into an egg as it revolves. A piece for the new museum on the window on Broadway. At the time, it was a completely different place. We were actually able to, Charlie was standing in the middle of the street taking this picture, and Andrew had disconnected all the street lights so that we could take this picture and not see reflections. There was not as much activity at that time. It's a piece called Triptych, where there's sort of a chaotic side and then this balanced, serene side. Different elements do spin into motion. And here's a work, one of my very, very favorites, called Vis-a-Vis, where there's a conversation across a pool of water, where the winds fluctuate. Andrew built all these things. There's a conversation across the winds that animates the surface of the water and the elements that are suspended between them. But the meeting of David, we actually met David. I was on my hands and knees on the floor of the same gallery, Art Galaxy, and we were showing Spheric Storm. And Andrew and I were doing our nightly maintenance, and David and James Wines had just had dinner, and James said, "David, I want you to see this piece." And so this mad, I mean, there we were, really working hard. It was very late, and this crazy man with this like baton and with sparkles on it was knocking on the window saying, "What's going on in there? Come out here." And that was the meeting with David. And from then on, it was just this fast and furious, fantastic friendship of going to see art together and meeting his whole collection. I mean, David not only collected art, he collected people. Seriously. And it was a very active adventure for him. And so this is a piece that Andrew and I built called Pananemone in City Hall Park for the Public Art Fund, where there are 40 different instruments suspended from the trees, and these copper spheres sort of strewn around and anchored to the ground, where you could see there were 40 smaller instruments. This is the central one. There were 40 instruments that showed the direction of the wind coming off through the channels of the city. So very, very animated work, because there's no one consistent current of air in this city, all reflected off of buildings and coming off the Brooklyn Bridge and so on. There's one of the smaller pieces. And then finally in, I think it was 97, David wanted to do this show in the midst of the art world, 420 West Broadway, where the Castelli Gallery had happened. And Tom Finkelpro was the curator of this show. And Andrew and I built this piece called Thelion, which was the beginning of a series of large wall pieces with spaces beyond. And there's components from other works there, but there's this enormous sphere spinning behind this sort of shaft of steam, and different elements. This light is traveling in an arc, illuminating these very fine elements on the wall. This is the piece called Phenomena, really, that we built in plaster. And it's really just the radius of my body. The center, there were sounds. We built 4 vowels. And this became part of the collection, even though it's not actually animated. It is in a certain way. There's the absence of a mouth in the center. So it's a sound, but and it harks back to not only putting your thumb in the clay, but also future work that we would then build at Union Square. This is the gathering of people in December of, I think, 97, with James Wines at the back, and George Rhodes, and James Seawright, and Ted Victoria, a whole cast of characters. There's Alison Skye. Anyway, I'll go forward. Art Spellings. Andy Vermont over there. I see you, Andy. Mimi Wright, and a wall piece that we built for Anina Nozay Gallery called Metathesis, where there's this, I don't know, 9-foot diameter gold sphere that's a disc that's revolving very slowly, and a sepulchral funnel where there's a single drop that drops on this hot plate and makes this little burst of steam, this little cloud. And these two very delicate balance beams across the edge, and a whole series of plumb bobs from Andrew's collection. We were invited to do a piece at the Museo Pecci in Florence, and this is the piece that we built there with a team of theatrical workers. It's actually a mobius that the belts, it's mechanical, so the belts actually cross each other. And in the distance, in the sort of chapel beyond, there's this flame that is sort of eclipsed by a gold ring. And this is a piece that David commissioned for the Wadsworth Athenaeum in Hartford. It's a piece we call Analemma, I believe, where there are these two worlds, the golden world with this balanced cone dancing on a column of air, and this glass sepulchral funnel that fractures as the light changes from in front to behind. It was a commission for the vitrines that would be seen outside so that the public could actually see the museum at night. And a piece for the Merce Cunningham Dance Company called Field and Figures, where we did the sets, costumes, and lighting, for we did not know what would appear. The music or the choreography was composed completely separately. So we were just one of 3 elements that were thrown together in this, I can't remember how many minutes, piece. So the backdrop has these stars and their discs and these tall fishing poles that are, and then I think we were, thanks to Barbara Flynn and Dick Bellamy, we were invited by Thomas Kellein to build this piece at the Kunsthalle in Basel, where both Susan and David and Charlie Erickson showed up. Charlie took these pictures. Susan and David were there, proud sort of collectors and believers, sort of parents of this endeavor. And there are these 2 immense cones that rise above this talc and ash floors. There's a stepped sort of charcoal pit, a dancing flame, and in the foreground is this boiling vessel, like the pharmaceutical capital of Bern, Basel, Switzerland, and this sort of exquisite clock in the distance, drawing concentric circles and destroying them in this talc. A diorama, a piece that you enter and just watch the different elements happen. And then we won the Rome Prize and found ourselves in Rome and discovered this exquisite building that had been a former aquarium, a piece called Ellipsis. We collaborated with the composer, Edmund Campion at the American Academy. He's there in the center in this sort of forest of laurel trees, playing the piano. And there's a choir of 23 voices that orbit the building. The choir, there was like a round. This was an elliptical song. And the audience would circle on the ground floor and just watch this event, this sound piece with 4,000 glasses of water on the floor. This is a work we did for the Brooklyn Academy of Music that involved we invited a dance company, Chandra Lekha, to come from Southern India to perform this piece. It was a project that was commissioned by BAM, conceived by Joe Malillo, where he wanted artists to invite the performing artists to work with them rather than the other way around. So we filmed one of the dancers' eyes opening very slowly and projected it 60 feet across this wall. This was presented at the Queen's Museum on this huge high wall that was there. And there's a martial artist who actually climbs this this vertical pole that we put together. There's a shadow above this figure that's breathing. Anyway, they're elaborate works and they're all based in time. It all began with Spheric Storm when Andrew said to me, why don't we introduce an element of time to this storm you want to build? And I said, let's. So also this is one of the earliest works. This is where I met Charlie Erickson on the Beinecke Plaza at Yale. I sort of divided the works up a bit. This is a 200-foot long hedge that I call smoke hedge, with 6-foot high aluminum dowels. They're like needles with the waves, the ribbons of elastics stretched between them. So the whole thing was really like a mirage and against this colonnade of the Cushing building. And then this is commissioned by the David Berman Foundation for it's not a great picture, forgive me, Charlie. It was commissioned for the exhibition out at the University of Santa Barbara, where perhaps Victoria, you were there as well, but we were so busy putting this in the lagoon.
I actually remembered this very well from seeing it and as well from David talking about it. So it's pretty amazing.
Pretty mad. They're 30-foot high. We found these telescopic fishing poles in Naples at the market and thought, oh, well, if we just paint them white, then they would disappear. So we did. It was an elaborate process. We do always, every single project, there's a lot of research. And then we had been offered this commission by the MTA to do something for a subway station. But we wanted to do something that was in the wind and on the roof and in Queens. And nothing ever worked out because the engineering would have cost more than building the piece. So we went to Rome and we thought, okay, now what are we going to do? Well, so why not work with what's here? So we thought of this project called Oculus that would involve photographs of New York City high school students across the city to try to collect the world in the city. And so we went around photographing in schools and worked with one of the high school students from Stuyvesant, who was very brilliant. Alec Merber helped us with all these photographs. And we printed all these photographs out and gave them to a mosaicist in Rome, Rinaldo Piras, who transformed these photographs into young divinities. And they're dispersed throughout the World Trade Chambers Park Place station. Beautiful to find the different colors in stone and glass to be able to make something that had shadow and depth. The further you get back from them, of course, the more pixel, the more realistic they are, but they're also quite beautiful close up. We photographed all the left eyes of these. Some of them are flipped and some of them are not. So they say that's where the depth of us, it lives. And there's a very large, oh, you don't see the whole piece. There's a very large centerpiece that's made, it's a very accurate map of the city of New York. You see Central Park here, that has made all the major parks and all the major roads in the city. And Antarctica is a little bit wild up there. We said to the mosaicist, do what you like. The centerpiece itself, it's built of concentric rows of mosaic, which is an insane amount of work. There's millions of tesserae in this. And this is the micro tesserae eye of Rinaldo himself, the mosaicist who worked with us. And some of there's a corridor underneath Church Street where these mosaics mostly are, rather than on the track walls. And then we were commissioned by the Board of Ed and the Department of Cultural Affairs with the Battery Park City to build a project for the new Stuyvesant High School that would be built at Chambers Street. And we decided to work again with this idea of constellation to spread the building. And the architect, Joe Leneling, spent a lot of time with us to help us understand the building. And we imagined this work that continues to this day It's a piece called mnemonics, a system for remembering. There are 4,000 blocks of glass that are sealed, where we built these collages. 4,000. What am I talking about? 400. Forgive me. And 88 of them represented the school's past, and there were contributions from alumni, and 88 of them are empty for future years into the year 2080 to fill. We were also, because this Stuyvesant was leaving its original building on 15th Street, we were able to adopt a few things to take with us. But we were excited by the idea that, you know, in the year 2080, high school students wouldn't have any idea what the Berlin Wall was. And so in the spirit of the fantastic collection that Andrew introduced me to of Edison's work, we decided, and also in the Tribune building in Chicago was part of the inspiration, and also relics that you see around the world that have so much mystery. We collected artifacts from all over the world through the American embassies that I had grown up in, inviting every American ambassador to send us something that had no monetary value, but that was perhaps part of the richness of the place, either ecologically or culturally. This is a leaf from the sacred bo tree in Sri Lanka. And then finally, a rather immense and difficult commission for a very different kind of developer, related companies at Union Square, for the Public Art Fund and the Municipal Art Society, who inspired this competition for an art wall that would sort of be a gateway to downtown. And Davis Brody Bond is the architect. And we ended up working with the same brick that the building was built of, and an incredible panel company who build panelized wall material, Artex in Canada. And we built this 29 panels built like as you saw, the stone or the sound. The idea was that we would have a fluid brick wall that would be the antithesis of that, and it would have this depth. And because New York City is animated with steam, it's one of the few cities in the world that has the energy in the street that you can buy to heat or cool your building. We thought we would tap into it to represent the complete intangibility of present tense time. So there it is, once upon a time, with the trade towers off there in the distance. I think it opened in oh dear, I don't know, I'm not good with time. If Andrew has the memory. But this piece opened, and there was a very elaborate sound element that was quite exquisite. But the digits, we were asked to work on the brick wall, but the rest of the building seemed to be too blank. So there are digits on the left that show the sum and the balance of the day. In this photograph, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and 13 minutes past 10 and 40 seconds. And there are 13 hours and 46 minutes and 19 seconds left until midnight. So at midnight, there was 12:24, and at noon, there are 2 12s. So the left counted up and the right counted down. And the center was the fifths of seconds, so rapid, very similar to the speed of where the stone drops into the waves. And on the lower right is this sphere that is a mechanical element that is in synchrony with the moon, that has one gold leaf half and the other is black. And I don't think anybody ever saw it move because it was working with the moon. So we have just proposed a project that's fallen on very deaf ears, unfortunately, because the building is 100% leased, and there's no reason in the world why a developer should spend money. But we're still hopeful, and we're hoping that somehow that these three, because the piece has been there now for 20 years, the wall was never lit. So the three proposed revisions would, the steam had been shut down. And so we're proposing there's a new element in the center that would be the center of the sunburst, and that the wall itself, the brick wall, would be lit, and that this globe becomes an LED sphere. We've discovered that we're working with a team of climate activists. Andrew Boyd and Gangola have transformed the readout not into the sum and the balance of the day, but into a climate clock. So it's quite exciting, and yet we've been doing it completely without support of the owners of the building. And we're hoping still to perhaps even convince the community or the alliance at the partnership at Union Square to work with us to help convince. So the idea is that the centerpiece becomes we've discovered this incredible, NASA has this amazing website called Earth Now, and there's a time lapse of the sun, and there's also a daily mosaic of the Earth that is played 24 hours late, and it's built from all of the satellites flying around the Earth. So the website, we're hoping that the whole wall could actually become a QR code for climate change, and yet we haven't made much progress yet. After that project at Union Square, I just couldn't take it anymore, and I decided a new chapter must begin. It was the ending of 20 years of collaboration with Andrew and a venture out into the world to collaborate with the world. A project called, that I continue to work on, Ephemeral Projects for the Eternal City. Originally, it was called Eternal Tiber. And Susan was really supportive of this project. I had imagined that somehow there could be this exquisite serpent, like Asclepius, swimming upstream. If you just had your scarf in the air, or the LEDs in the river that would become animate because the river is flowing, and that you could somehow project the wolf, the mascot of the city of Rome, on this wall and get the wolf to parade. So these are original studies. And I also started working with the city planning office of the city of Rome, inspired by the work that we had done on the Hudson. I thought, well, why not? You know, artists can help to change the world, can't they? And so it was a major adventure, definitely a beautiful rabbit hole to go down. And this is the site itself, where I'll show you a moment where it just so happens that this site is the same exact length and width as the Circus Maximus. And I thought, wow, what a magical theater for contemporary art in the heart of Rome, a place that's such an exquisite stage, and yet there's no support for contemporary art in Rome. And so I've worked for almost 20 years with a team of people. I found an Italian nonprofit, which makes absolutely no sense because there's no philanthropy in Italy, to make this open air gallery that I call Piazza Tevere in the heart of the city. And now I've sort of left it, and my energies are elsewhere. So here's an aerial view. You see the Vatican there, and this is a document. This is an exhibition that I had at the Museum of Trastevere, showing the 10 years of programming and planning for the multiple projects that happened on this site while I was there. The first one was this study of she-wolves, where I had imagined that you could make this parade. I still haven't built it, but I did do drawings I worked with an archaeologist and drew most of the she-wolves in art history, and was able with the sanitation department to power wash them from the 30-foot walls of the embankment walls of the river. So that was the first sort of frieze, 1,800-foot long parade of wolves in chronological order that still have not become animate yet, but hopefully will. The opening, we lit with there are 40 American university programs in Rome, and we lit 2,758 wax torches that burnt from sunset to sunrise. And there was a full moon gift. So that was a wonderful beginning and tribute to the city with its own. And in 2002, I invited an artist to do the animation of the she-wolf, somebody who knew how to draw really beautifully. And instead of doing the she-wolf animation, William Kentridge and a whole team of art historians led by Lila Yan at John Cabot University, who curated this like parade, but not in chronological order whatsoever, of Rome's greatest triumphs and tragedies. And we worked with this extraordinary production team from New York here, the office, and we're able to power wash this phenomenal group of, there's Mussolini with his arm cut off and the small figures. Pasolini is there. So there's a series of figures from prehistoric, well, early time to from the filmic history also. And the opening was this insane, fantastic series of 3 nights where Philip Miller, the composer who's worked with William for many, many years, created this procession for these 2 marching bands, the Triumphs and the Laments. And not only had we power washed the frieze, but we created this performance of absolutely magical cacophony, where there's this death march and this wild sound of joy and lighting. Anyway, so it was really kind of the most, we made art history in Rome. What can I say? It took 16 years to get this project to happen, but major performers from the team were there. And currently I work on multiple, much more immediate projects. One of them is a series of timescapes that I've been doing for many years, where I park the camera somewhere and just take a picture every 15 seconds or every minute, depending. And this is one it's actually called Frick Magnolia. It's on the website of the Frick Museum, where there are these just spectacular magnolia trees that flower. I think this was across 25 days. And then down below is a piece from the Blue Mountain Center on the Eagle Lake that you can actually see through my website. And there's this ongoing series of photographs, tomographs actually, done at a medical imaging lab. This is a passion fruit, and this is a gourd, or it's one of those pickles, those bitter pickles from China, from the Indian market. And I continue to work on water with ink that floats and print it on paper. And then I've always done this series of anemographs where there's a pen and there's wind, and somehow I choreograph the situation. It's all collaboration. It's all synergy. Even this work I did this summer, I discovered this exquisite little instrument built by an engineer, and there are 2 pendulums and a single pen, and the paper is moving, and it's like in a record player, but the paper is moving, and I played with these. So it's very difficult for me to work with my hand. There are 2 major projects I'm working on. One is called Behold, and the other is Oculus. Behold, they're both ongoing, and they're both sort of merging because of the potential of augmented reality that really excites me. After Rome, so many years working in Rome, I wanted to find something ancient in New York City. And I discovered this tree of wonder. It's the oldest tree in Manhattan. It's an English elm. It's in the northwest corner of Washington Square Park. It's more than 360 years old. And I had never seen it, although I've walked by it a million times. And so I'm trying to imagine how one could turn this tree into a weather station for better understanding nature, somehow to work with physiologists, universities, with students, to build some kind of ongoing platform where one could see beneath the bark and within the bark and have exquisite sort of live data harvested from this tree. So this is a series of studies. Arup Engineering has joined me in the project, and they did this LiDAR scan of the whole site. I hired this young model maker and pilot to fly around the tree and put the 2 things together, the LiDAR scan and the photogrammetry. And so the project is underway, even though there's absolutely no support yet, except for people believing that we should be able to understand trees better and see beneath the bark, and that perhaps this can become some kind of weather station, not just this tree, but as a model for other projects that could be open source. So I've been working with a really, really brilliant data visualization artist named Richard Vigen in Holland. And he has built these images that are on, let's see if I can make this move, yes. So what we have here is the cool side of the tree and the warm side of the tree. And we're seeing the carbon that's being attracted to the tree, but also the molecules that are transpiring through the leaves. Anyway, all of this is visible. You can find pieces of these clues from this. And Oculus. Oculus is the project of my wildest dreams. It would take place in the Pantheon. Let's see if I can go to 2 minutes. So this is an example of one of the time lapses. If I go to 2:45, you can begin to see what happens. A very dear friend of mine, Kina Lesky, is working with me now on this project, and she was there this night, not this night, but when we were able to watch the light fill the volume. We spent a night there, this team and I had befriended the custodian and brought some of my colleagues from the American Academy to just watch the light fill the void. So we were there, and this project called Oculus, it would be a rain of threads that come down from the oculus that replicate the cone that is the sort of telescope that you are when you're so small in this immense space. It's 150 feet high. So I'm working on this project, which is highly improbable that it'll ever get built, but in some form perhaps it will. This is one of the stills from the 48-hour time lapse that I took from the altar. And thanks to COVID, I mean, I know it's been a terrible time, but I had a number of really, really inspiring studio visits. One with a brilliant photographer, Robert Bowen, and then a person that I met thanks to Victoria, Michael Benson, who wrote this exquisite book called Cosmographics. And I said, I'd really like to show a nighttime view of this piece, and I'm very curious about the floor. There are these marks on the floor that look like some sort of ephemeris. And so I spoke to both Bob and Michael about this project, and Michael came back to me with this idea. He said, what if we projected this incredible image that I've built from the Canada, France, Hawaii telescope that shows more than 30,000 galaxies? Why don't we project it onto the floor? And I said, the floor? I said, no, let's project it onto so, I mean, it's a fantasy project, but we don't know. I'm hoping that it can happen someday. So this is Michael Benson's image that's composite. It's a collage. It's a thousands and thousands of pictures that are collected from this telescope that show all of time, or hundreds of thousands of years of time, as we know the night sky is. And this is a composite of the times of day starting at 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Of the light in the Pantheon and in the middle of June near the summer solstice. So it's a dream project. So Kina Lesky introduced me to this really wonderful young student at the Rhode Island School of Design, Yuhao Zhang, who we call Giordano. And he's been working with me on this project now for 3 years. This is from the LiDAR. This is from the scan of the building. It's like an X-ray of the building. And I think that's what I have. There are 3 websites. You'll find that if you go into the main door, Jones Ginzel, you can find both myself and Andrew in our separate work. And also this Eternal Tiber website that I've been building for many years is the last thing you'll see. And I think I will just end with that. It was too much. I'm sorry, but hey.
Not too much. It's really amazing. And it's actually always interesting to me when I see decades of work, how there's a kind of a thread that keeps coming back, whether it's your drawings or really collaborative work. And it's interesting that you said even when you were drawing with the wind, you were looking at it as a collaboration. That's actually quite beautiful. So just to introduce people who are here, which is making me super happy because it's really the goal is to bring back the community of people who have in some way been touched by David Berman or the foundation, and then of course the future work. We were just joined by James Wines, who was actually mentioned a couple of times in your talk. Welcome, James. We're happy to have you here. And then Sally Weber.
All right, let me see if I can get my thing here moving.
Okay. And Sally was also profiled as James was. So that's available on the David Berman site, both fantastic artists. David Famillion, who is a curator at the Beale Center of Art and Technology and was resident at the foundation, also gave a wonderful talk with Karen Moss, his partner. Ted Victoria is our next guest after Amir and Emily Scher. I think I'm pronouncing their last name correctly. I hope I am. I'm very excited to have you join us in our next gathering because I'm really into STEAM Reconfigured and I'm excited about the work you're doing. And of course, I have a whole life at UC Santa Barbara in my background, so there's something there that I want to tap into. And then Ted Victoria will be also profiled. So it's just really.
Andrew is here, and
I was just going
he's the magician.
I was just going to pass it on to Andrew, who I think absolutely has to say something because 20 years of collaboration, I almost feel like it could have been a little bit back and forth during the discussion, but we didn't think
I know
ahead of time.
Well,
So,
David was funny because he was always more interested in the girls.
oh yes,
so he would joke. I mean, he knew Andrew's name, but he would say, and the guy I can't remember his name because he was such a flirt. And anyway, Andrew's always been a very soft-spoken and very sort of profound guy. So he doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He just loves to work.
So in a very backward way, David, who could have been perceived as sexist by some, actually helped female artists in a really good way, as we see with you. But Andrew also benefited from it from the sidelines. So I would love to get a little bit of your point of view.
Well, David was definitely fearless in a certain sense, in that, and I think at the time he was fearless because he was willing to embrace a kind of a whole spectrum of different kinds of approaches to art making, and you can certainly see that in his support of Sight and James Wines, and he was not afraid of sort of idiosyncratic investigations, and certainly not of any kind of distinction between media whatsoever. So there was a kind of an embrace and an energy that he brought to supporting artists that was really quite unique, especially at the time.
How much did you have interaction with him when you were working with KRISTIN? I'm curious.
Well, the interaction varied depending on project, but of course we would visit him up in Rye, New York, in his house, but also he would come to town and take people for dinner and smoke his cigars and pass the cigars around and
Rant about the art world.
yes.
So another point I wanted to ask about is that wonderful group photo that you have from where we see James Wines and you and Seawright and all these amazing people. I mean, one of the things that James was talking to us about is how there was a whole community in Soho in particular. That's probably where that was shot. I think that's what you said.
In our loft here.
In your loft, exactly. That was very much a predecessor, a precedent to environmentalism and kind of overshadowed by pop art. And now people are looking back and saying, wait a minute, there were all these incredible artists who kept being active, but the movement that was there was not somehow seen by us. Can you say a few words about that, James?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here because I certainly share the sensibility. We really have a long history because we both lived in Rome a long time and had that connection. And also, I think the fundamental issue in Kristen was saying today is that we really oppose this idea of plunking down public art. And that was what I call plop art in a very early article, and sort of came into the language. But the idea that everything is absorbed from the context. Without the context, you don't have public art. If it doesn't, in a sense, relate either conceptually or physically or some way to something that's either existent or pre-existent or psychologically already there. And I think both our sensibilities, so then it's not public. It's really not a form of public art. Then it could be put in a gallery or museum and so forth. So that Soho generation, all of us really basically were hitting the streets. I'm not sure, economically, whether it was a very astute decision because the galleries still run the world. But I think everybody was really getting out from under those spotlights and a dealer sitting in the corner and everything on a pedestal or in a frame. And it was a real revolution. And I don't think as a collective enterprise has ever been credited. I've been trying to work on MoMA for years and convince them they should really have a definitive exhibition on the subject. But they never quite. I think when most museums miss a whole movement, what they do is they pretend it didn't exist, even though
Right.
I certainly had plenty of exposure to MoMA shows there and continuing support and everything. But the fact of something larger, some larger issue that constitutes what might be called a movement is hard. It's very difficult to get a museum, even though the individuals in the movement have been celebrated. But I remember even then we really had some of my best friends, of course, were from Peter McConchie and Bob Smithson and people like that. Nancy Holt, Alice Aycock, who's still around, fortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But we at that time always just say, well, why don't they really do something with the entire concept? So somebody will do it one day. I mean, the influence is overwhelming. I think anybody who knows the art scene today.
I think artists like to think of themselves as individuals. I never thought of myself as part of a kinetic art movement. I was just I just like to do my work, I mean, I was grateful for the community that David created around us and the exuberance that he shared.
Yeah.
But
one thing that David did was he was also willing to support and sort of share the interaction with young curators such as Tom Finkelpearl, who was basically just starting out and was very much willing to sort of support their vision of how to pull things together.
That's true. And we're so eager to get Tom on this series because he has so much to share.
And say about public art. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, but I guess, Kristen, what I was alluding to is the underpinnings of environmentalism and ecology in the public art, and many of the people in the community that David was supporting. That yes, it was kinetics, but it was also art and science. And the moment it becomes about that, the awareness of the planet and ecology kind of goes hand in hand with it. So
Yeah, well, the work was, I mean, the metronome was kind of an over the top project. I mean, we were trying to tap into the steam, but of course nobody was thinking about saving energy at that moment. So, 20 years ago, I'm afraid it's not that long. So here we are today. But yeah, I think that, my interest in doing this tree project, because it is true that there's so much science that we don't know or understand. And I'm working with the physiologist at the School of the Environment at Yale, Craig Broderson, who said, well, yes, Kristen, we get millions of dollars a year for our research, but nobody knows what we do. And I said, well, for me, seeing is believing. Can we somehow work together on seeing what's beneath the bark? Can we see the transpiration of water? And then Richard Weigand with data visualization, this fellow that I spoke to recently from Disney Labs in Zurich says, well, we're not there yet. You should just build an AR in the classroom, or that could be anywhere in the world, rather than try to synchronize it with the actual tree. But I think we're getting there.
We're getting there, but the doomsday clock was just moved to 1 minute to midnight. So the urgency is very much there. And I think that a lot of the artists in this room are very much dedicated to creating that kind of awareness, including, of course, Amir and Emily, who are teaching a whole new generation of youngsters dealing with technology and trying to connect it to the environment. Can you say a few words about that?
Yeah, I would say that first, I definitely, coming in here and seeing this body of work for I don't know how many decades is extremely, for us, overwhelming, because we're really newer to this. I mean, I think that it's important, and we'll share when we share, next time, really coming from a background like me personally, engineering, and then both of us education, and then engineering education, and then really being moved and influenced by what we were able to do with students, and then really seeing Vermont and his collection, and then a lot of other, kinetic art and more like public art, really realizing that was a direction we could move with our students. So for me personally, this is just very, inspirational, and it just gives me hope that the types of things that we can, that we're looking toward in the future can really be possible. It's just opens your eyes to how much is possible.
And I think also for us, I mean, thank you for inviting us. We're obviously working in a high school, in a public high school, and we have 400 students that we work with annually. And we started out as a program that was really focused on technology and robotics. And we've really moved into more of like a STEAM idea and bringing in very intentionally art and design. And we started doing that about 10 years ago. And that was very disruptive. And people were like, no art with robotics. And we were like, but it's so great. and so now that's really what we're more known for, and we're really expanding upon that idea, and people are more excited about it. But at the time, people were like, what are you doing? No, it's only about robots. Art is not related to technology. We're like, no, it is.
And I think
And that's 10 years ago. I mean, that's really sad if you think back to everything that has been happening. So when I was bringing students to the collection in Santa Ynez, that it was just very much to say, this is not new. what you're doing is not new. We're part of a whole lineage, and that's the wonderful part of the David's collection of not only art, but people who really worked with art, science, and technology, and supporting that really helped the movement move ahead. So we have lots of hope in the youngsters who will save our world, and it's a big responsibility. And it makes me think of, Kristen, your project that you and Andrew did with the high school students in the Stuyvesant High School. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have built a project that continues, so that every graduating class makes their year block as well as their yearbook.
They still do it?
Yeah, we created 88 empty blocks. So that graduating classes into the year up to the year 2080, when the building opened, so it's exactly, it mirrors the, so we dealt with 88 years have passed and left 88 years of future blocks that are sandblasted with their name. So when you enter as a freshman, you see this empty block. I mean, you have to find it, but it's somewhere in the 10 floors of the new Stuyvesant High School.
Really nice. I really like that piece. It's new to me. I didn't know, because I don't go to the Stuyvesant High School.
You can't just walk in there.
So are there any comments from our wonderful
Ted.
here?
Unmute yourself, Ted.
So Ted, Victoria, can you unmute yourself, please? You're muted, Ted.
That microphone thing.
The microphone thing at the bottom left.
Over here.
There you are. So Ted Victoria is going to be featured on this program as well, as I mentioned earlier. And we're super excited about that because David loved your work. There's many in the collection, and I believe Bess said there's about 8 that are in the Butler collection right now, even installed. So that's super exciting.
Well, Ted's one of the real originals. I'm not a real original.
Clyde
James C. Wright, they're real originals.
I became an original by showing at OK Harris with Ivan Karp,
wow.
and Ivan Karp and David were very close.
Yeah,
And
I know.
he had a lot to do with it. I mean, I think they were having lunches and dinners for at least once a week,
And cigars.
And with cigars, right? Like
and James Wines too. No, sorry, not James Wines. The gallery.
Oh yeah, I mean, Ivan and I were great friends. It's interesting. There were all kind of everybody connected. I kind of live a double life now because we're some museums and Avery Library are doing these site archives now. So I'm trying to contribute to all this nostalgia, but on the other hand, I'm the restless type, and like Kristen, I always believe there's a next step and the next thing. And so I started actually a series of lectures recently called Economy of Means, which is really the future architecture, if anything is. I think the kind of rambunctious overkill with computer design shapes is going to end pretty quickly simply because it's not practical, but it's also not feasible from an environmental perspective. So I find myself extremely interested now in new works that are connected to environmental subjects or consciousness, but are done with that thing I call economy of means, that they're not inherently destructive in the use of materials, the uses of energy, the use of the scale or whatever. So I think that's becoming a big thing. What makes me sad though is I think I'm doing this as a series, but I've only given one of these programs in the USA, where internationally, I've done one in Tehran, I did one in Tokyo, I did one in Beijing. I mean, so the international interest is very encouraging, but I often wonder, this country, I guess we went through the Trump thing, but I often wonder, what's going on? Are we really have that initiative to really look at the environment in all perspectives, but from all professions too. I think this is a very important movement, and Kristen and Andrew have really, really made pioneering efforts in those directions, have done things that do in fact represent economy of means, but also advance knowledge and interest and what I call environmental sensibility, really.
Right.
So it's really to be congratulated. I'm glad, you know, and it's interesting that David Raman did have those instincts early on. He felt that there is something else going on in the art world, and it's not just exhibitable in the conventional sense. It's more than that. It goes beyond, it goes into performance. And, you know, I've been having a lot to do with the early performance art. They were all in the Bowery, whereas the environmental artists were all in Soho. And so there's a lot of dialogue. You know, the biggest problem is that people are dying off because of the age group. But it really is an interesting big umbrella that I think that now is getting to be appreciated in the extreme. And this is good to have this series because it's really
one of the things about David was that I think that his approach was that the art was not exclusive to a rarefied audience. He was very much engaged in putting it out, like in parking lots and in streetscapes, and engaging with the strip malls that he owned, and so there was a kind of expansiveness about his vision, about the capacity for art to sort of intervene in a much larger sort of civic way than normally found.
Yeah, and I was so, I mean, I love to see how he and Susan worked off each other, and how Susan sort of took over the foundation afterwards and endeavored to support projects that were also very much environmentally conscious, you know. I think that, you know, I'm so sorry they're not both here with us, because I mean, we're continuing, but they're, you know, and they're here. And I just, you know, I feel that, you know, perhaps because of Susan's ability to really nurture natural things, the natural world, that she would be more and more interested in environmental projects today.
Yeah,
Well,
the
she
relevance.
certainly had a love for animals, and supported any project that dealt with animals.
Anything living.
No, the relevance is increasing all the time. It's just getting broader and broader. And you know, the amount of, well, I'm 89 now, and I'm 90.
Oh,
And I think to myself, you know, probably the most heartening thing in my life is that I would say 90% of the mail I get are from young people in their 20s interested in environmental art in general. So there is a real, you know, if the art world really knows this thing, there really is that a kind of a global incentive to look at the environment and look at the context and everything very, very differently.
Well, my fantasy for the Behold project, the tree project, is that somehow together one would be able to break down the barrier. I mean, if just 0.5% of the profits for the entertainment industry, for Disney, for Industrial Light and Magic, for all of those incredible corporations, it's all Disney, owned by Disney. If somehow between that and Unity and the software companies and Microsoft, if there was like 0.5% of the money invested in science education and in art, because I think if you can make the science visible, it's easier to understand the world. Anyway, I'm really trying very hard with this tree project to try to forge ahead and bring people together to talk about it. You know, why can't we work with people mathematicians doing fluid dynamics? And why can't we work with the gaming industry? Why does it have to be all for profit? Why can't it be just for education, which is profit? Anyway.
No, it's really good.
Well, I don't want to end on this note.
I'm sorry.
But I do want to say that, well, actually, I want to pass it on to Bess, who's been quietly listening, and just see, actually, before we close it, just one last question from Sally Weber.
Hi there. It's a gorgeous presentation. Congratulations. It's really lovely to see the span of the work. But I just want to bring up something that we're doing here. My husband and I are going to be doing. We're hoping, if we get a certain amount of funding, and not all that much is needed, to do projects with middle school kids on art and science. And starting at that level, to me, there's never been a difference between art and science and technology or anything else, because what it does is enliven one field with the other and allows the kids who might be good in, say, two-dimensional work to work with kids who are good in three-dimensional work, and they cross thinking, or somebody who's really good in math works with somebody who's not. And so what I'm hoping is we're going to be able to do this and actually start off with something inspired by Lumia's as a way of bringing these things together. And I'm hoping that at the lowest level, we're in Oakland here, and with kids that just come in for workshops, start to say to not only the schools, but the school boards, that this could help in all of these other academics, and not to split the fields so that the fields come together. That was the whole idea of STEAM originally. And I haven't been in education all, through my career, but other people have. So I'm hoping, just like Victoria does at the graduate level, bring that, but start with the little people or the littler people.
So we do have a summer program for high school kids that started in 2006.
That's right. That's right.
And some of the most incredible graduates have written to us since. But what amazes me is that to this day, you have students coming in and saying that they're asked to make a decision. Should I go into the sciences or in the arts? And if I go in the arts, I'm not going to make any money. And if I go in the sciences, I will, or technology. If very early on we say, hey, you know what, there's no difference, and here are examples that are inspirational, I think it's a great thing. And it should be started at day one of arriving to this planet. So everybody here is such an inspiration at every level, and it's cross-generational now, which is super exciting to me. To hear 20-year-olds being interested in James Wine's work is amazing. That's a great thing. That's a testament to the work that's being done and the work that David supported.
Victoria, you're the testament that's kept this all alive. I mean, I'm meeting you
on the sidelines
at Santa Barbara, but it's really wonderful to see how I had no idea until you contacted me like 6 months ago that the collection had moved to the Butler. I'd lost touch. I mean, I'd been in touch after Susan passed away, but hardly at all with Bess since then, maybe on Susan's birthday once in a while, but I had no idea whether even Chris was there and what had happened. So I think it's great that it's moved to the Butler, that it's a museum that doesn't have to be isolated from other worlds. So I really congratulate all of you, David Bermant and Andrew Bermant and the whole clan of you who are now on the board. So hurrah. And these series of talks really enliven the whole situation. I really have, I was able to watch them all before presenting myself. So the responsibility, it's really nice because we embody things.
It's a community. And it's really exciting to see everybody here, and Amir and Emily will be presenting next month, which is in a couple of days. There's already February. How did this happen? And then after that, we'll have Ted Victoria in March, which is super exciting. I finally pass it on to Bess to close our session. She opens our session and closes our session. This is our formality.
Thank you, Victoria. Can you guys hear me? I think I'm muted, not on mine.
I will hear you.
You can hear me?
You're all right.
Oh, okay.
Hear you.
Well, Sally, for sure you should tune in to Amir and Emily's, because exactly what you're talking about doing, they've already done, and such an amazing job of it too. So I hope we see you for that. But KRISTIN, amazing presentation. I loved every minute. I was riveted, and it was such a great turnout. I can't wait for you to do yours, Ted. That's going to be so good too. And maybe we can all meet at the Butler to see all of Ted Victoria's pieces there on display. Anyways, thank you so much. Thank you so much, KRISTIN, for taking the time, and Victoria and Amir and everyone, and
Thank you, Bess.
David.
Thank you, Bess.
Hi,
Thank you
David.
for making this happen.
President,
Bye,
President.
Thank you.